Are robots just gonna take all of our jobs? That was the question I was asking myself as I was working on this dice tray and dice tower for my brother over the holidays. And I've got this big shop full of power tools, and so I was kind of going through the normal process of getting walnut stock, milling it down, cutting all the joints, gluing everything. But I also knew I was going to use a laser as well as a CNC to do a few things I'm just not skilled enough to do by hand. And kind of over the years, I found that more and more these tools like lasers and 3D printers and CNCs have replaced more and more of the tools and processes that I was doing. And lately I've been getting the feeling they're not just gradually replacing the tools in the shop, they're kind of replacing me. And as it turns out, I'm not the only person to think this.
Robots are coming for our jobs.
But there's no way to stop this technology.
Why is wage growth still slow? A lot of people think technology might have something to do with that.
People know about what's happened in manufacturing, but I think it's moving more to the service sector. Your retail stores, your restaurants, jobs in those places are really going to change.
The rise of artificial intelligence and machine learning has led some humans to fear they're being made redundant.
IBM came right out and said, we're going to pause hiring for jobs that we think that AI could actually do.
Football, hot dogs, and automation taking jobs. How much more American can you get?
As AI slowly takes away what people's jobs are, we'll find a growing class of people who don't have that same purpose anymore. Do you then also have to think about that and wonder, like, what does it mean to be human if it's not my job? And can you tell me what that is?
So what started as like a traditional DIY tutorial turned into a much deeper dive on technology and its impact on us. So is the future DIY or DBM? Let's find out. So if you've been online at all the last year, you know that AI has been all the rage. Things like ChatGPT and Bard for text, or Midjourney, DALL-E, Stable Diffusion for images. And it's definitely something that people have started to worry about, especially in relation to jobs. You can see here's an article from May from the New York Times. AI's threat to jobs prompts questions on who protects the workers. But I kind of wanted to go back further and see if stuff like this had happened before. It turns out it has. So going back to 1980 with a headline that you could definitely write today, a robot is it after your job? And specifically, this was talking about manufacturing robots taking over a lot of auto industry jobs. But let's go even further back, about 100 years.
Hey, Scott!
This is from 1928. March of the Machines makes idle hands. And honestly, that's like a variation of a lot of the comments I get. You're removing the person and the hands from the job. Computers are just gonna take over everything. We're gonna lose the ability to make things with our own hands. That is definitely not new. And you got this pretty crazy chart that basically just shows production going up and then it really goes up. And then you also see it tracking employment, which also goes up until the point that it breaks and then it slowly goes down. And this article goes on to talk about that a lot of those gains in production were the result of technology, which adversely affected the number of people that were employed. But it hasn't always been this like doom and gloom. In fact, Henry Ford, yes, that Henry Ford, talked about how technology has actually increased the number of jobs in his factories, even though production has also gone up as well. So this op-ed from 1938, he's actually talking to his critics specifically that are upset about the fact that he is seemingly taking away jobs by adding in technology. When he says,
"We have the Ford Motor Company have combated that fallacy through the 35 years of our corporate existence by building to date, with the help of machinery, nearly 27 million motor cars. And this creating in the automotive and its contributory and subsidiary industries countless tens of thousands of jobs, unimagined when we began business, and literally over all the roads of the world, paving the way to millions of jobs still undreamed."
And he actually goes on to say pretty much all the money they have put into labor-saving machinery has actually increased the employment.
So one year when we spent $4 million for machinery, our employees increased by 20,000. Another year, we spent $9 million for machinery. Our employees increased by 40,000 in our payroll by 88 million. And so it has gone.
So when it comes to jobs, why are people so for technology and then some people so against technology? Now you can totally say that Henry Ford is pretty biased, but I'm sure you've seen this play out even in your own situation. In fact, when I was first getting into woodworking, like CNCs wasn't really a thing yet, at least ones that were super affordable. The fight was over things like this. So like a traditional, this is like a Japanese saw versus this power tool. The fact that you could add power that wasn't generated physically from your own hands or arms or body or however you cut stuff was a huge deal, whether it was a battery or it was plugged in. Now coming back to our automotive example, how could you have so many people for something and so many people against something in relation to jobs? Well, it all depends on your frame of reference. So I came across this research paper from 2018 from Boston University, Automation and Jobs When Technology Boosts Employment. And I came across the series of charts. They're the same thing, just 3 different industries, and they basically track the number of people employed over time. It starts out with like the textile and clothing industry, and you can see it kind of peaked right at the early 1900s, then slowly went down. Same thing if you now move to the iron/the steel industry. Again, that's going to peak around the 1950s. And what's interesting is when we look at the automotive industry, you can kind of see how this curve is pretty much pushed forward, where it's really starting to ramp up in the late 30s/early 40s, which was exactly when Henry Ford was talking about all of his employment numbers. And what the researchers of that paper found is that regardless of the industry that you're talking about, technology is pretty much going to follow the same curve in relation to labor and jobs. So what happens? First, you have a game-changing piece of technology or like a series of improvements. In our case with automotive, the assembly line, that's going to ramp up production and you're going to generate more profits because you're able to sell more things, but it's not going to cost you that much more to do it. Now, if there's still more unmet demand, the easiest way to ramp that production even higher is still to hire more and more people to not only run the machines, but also do all the other things that you need to do to produce cars. That kind of beginning of the curve is where we see Henry Ford living. But if I'm getting my Econ 101 right, eventually that supply and demand is going to even out. You start out with really high demand but low supply, so you can kind of ramp up your costs, including labor, to get there. Once those match out, now to continue to grow your business, you're going to have to reduce your costs. And because of all that new technology you've introduced, the easiest way to do it is to reduce labor. And it's that back half where all of this doom and gloom really lives, and why we can see so many examples over time of why people get afraid of technology, because usually they're talking about different industries. And so going back to our lasers and our CNCs, we probably are still on kind of that increase, and then eventually it is going to start going further and further down. So where does this leave us? Well, first, if you're a hobbyist, so what? You can use a handsaw, you can use a circular saw, you can use a big powered table saw, you can use a CNC. Use the tools that you want to use to make the stuff that you want to make. You're just doing it for fun anyway. But if you actually want to make money, you're probably gonna need to go to the extremes in terms of like price as well as what we'll call uniqueness. Now, the Etsy example that pretty much started all of this is this dice tray that my brother actually sent me. And I realized I've actually been seeing these more and more over the years, but I've also seen that price go further and further down as people are able to more mass produce them. So how can you still make money and make a business? Where I've seen great examples is when people go to the other end, and that is the high-end extreme, both in terms of cost as well as quality, complexity, all that kind of stuff. Which brings me to the example of what I built my dice tray and dice tower from, and that is from Wormwood. They are a high-end manufacturer. They use super nice wood. They also use lots of lasers and CNCs and automated tools to make these really cool, unique products. And they're also able to charge a good bit more. Now, before you come at me, I'm not selling what I made my brother. I just saw a cool design and tried to see if I can make it myself. But as you think about the products that you sell or you might sell, you're gonna actually find that technology and robots are gonna help you stand out from the crowd. I found there's kind of 3 different ways that you can do it. Let's talk about the A, B, C's. And I want to use the example of the dice tray to point those out. So A is going to be for accuracy or automation. B is going to be for like branding, bespoke design, and C is going to be for creativity. So especially on the accuracy side of things, these machines are super helpful, and even in ways you may not think. In fact, the software side of stuff, which we really aren't talking about, makes a huge difference. Pretty much everything I build nowadays, I wind up mocking up in a digital world. In my case, it's Fusion 360. I even have a course on Fusion 360 if you want to make furniture yourself. What's super nice about it is you basically build it before you build it, so you can kind of figure out where the flaws are going to be, how it's going to visually look, and you can actually take a lot of those designs directly to a CNC and a laser and then use them directly from there. But actually, for what I built my brother, I specifically used it for this dice vault. It's actually the internals of this vault, so I used the CNC to cut out that pocket and then also cut out the frame around it. Now, you definitely could do that with a router and a jig. I just didn't have that set up, so it actually was faster for me just to go ahead and use the CNC, and then I knew everything was super accurate and it was going to line up. And also with this project, this was like the first time I've pretty much included leather in anything that I make, and because of that, I don't have like a lot of nice leather cutting tools. And so even something as simple as cutting a rectangle out of the leather leather to put at the bottom of the tray, actually used the laser to do that because I had the dimension and I could do it really quick. Now on the automation side of things, this is where it is super handy to use a laser, and then especially a CNC, is you can have these machines running while you're doing other things. On the safety side of things, you definitely want to be around, especially with the laser. Now for branding and bespoke design, I pretty much used it to do all of the Dungeons and Dragons logos that I put on there, whether they're just straight laser engraved or I laser engraved them and then did a fill of like this brass powder. But you could do a CNC and do these like super nice reverse inlays where you have different color woods that make different patterns. They're just insane, and you can definitely drive up the price on those type things compared to the material that you're going to be using. And then the third one just has to do with creativity. Having these tools really do give you superpowers in terms of the things that you can make. If you're making more of these woodworking boxes, what if you did a 3D carve of a relief on the side that is specific to whatever the customer wanted? And then with lasers and or CNCs, you can pretty much add any designs or texts or writing to any surface of the things that you're making. So again, my brother, Dungeons & Dragons, you have these descriptions of these characters that my brother sent me. I took that description, put it into a few of the AI image generators, and it gave me all of these different designs that I could say, hey, this is gonna be laser engraved, make sure it's a vector, and I would get this awesome result that then I could take and laser engrave directly onto the thing that I'm making. You definitely could charge a good bit more versus like the stock bulk stuff that you already see on Etsy. So I would encourage you guys to use all of the technology to create something that is super unique and creative for whatever you want to make. So if you're like me and you're using a hand plane to make sure you have the dividers the same size as the rails on your box, or if you're milling lumber with a planer or a joiner, or if you're creating crazy designs with a laser, all of those are different pieces of technology. They're gonna let you make really cool stuff. Now I know this video is a little bit different than what I normally do, and I actually would love to know what you think on this conversation between jobs and technology, as well as this video style and stuff for the future. All right, until next time, go make with all the tools that you got, or break something in your shop. See you guys.